to Doing Life. We are so excited to be with you, and today we are going to be talking about boundaries.
Yeah.
And we really believe in healthy relationships. And, you know, when we say boundaries, some people are like, what are boundaries?
Yeah,
and
totally.
what does that have to do with a relationship? So my way of explaining it is kind of setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Setting your marriage up, your relationship up, so both of you flourish.
Yep.
And it's really to prevent any of the foxes from getting in.
Yeah,
And
what is that, Song of Solomon verse, I think?
Song of Solomon. And foxes could be anything from, like, maybe an adulteress, or maybe it's just having a hard heart towards them, or not being thankful, or whatever it may be. Preventing those foxes from coming in and setting your marriage up so it's well protected, so your garden can grow.
Because the picture, and I'll let you keep going, but the picture that Song of Solomon gives, just for context, which I love, is that your marriage is a vineyard.
Yes.
And that the foxes are these little animals that'll come in and nibble at the grapes. And that's essentially the picture. And so instead of this, a lot of times marriages aren't ruined necessarily by the huge storm.
No.
They're ruined, or they at least start
little
going,
things.
by the little things, the little grapes being eaten by the foxes.
And
So,
Satan wants nothing more than to destroy and bring down your marriage, because marriage is God's picture to people, to show them, like, this is what I'm like. This is how I love the church, and how we're to dedicate ourselves to the Lord. And when we have a healthy marriage, people are like, wow, I want to know more about your God. And when you don't have a healthy marriage, then they're like, and Satan can really get in and destroy.
This makes me think of, we're in the thick of parenting right now.
Yeah.
And that means we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. It's obviously a different dynamic than a marriage because it's not equal with the parents and the kids, but it's similar in regards to boundaries are important, right?
We have to be careful, because in our generation, we can think boundaries are legalistic.
Yes.
And we try to run from that when really it is important.
I think sometimes in the grace movement, which, man, we are grace people to death. We have life and joy and beauty because of grace. But I think in that particular sphere, we can overdo it in the sense of, if it takes work, it must be legalistic.
Or if it's a rule. Or,
here's a better way to put it. Legalism is where you're stealing joy from yourself or from your relationship because the rules are overbearing and have no life.
Yeah.
Boundaries are the rules you set in place to give you more life.
That's
That's the difference, right? And I think, like I said, think back to our kids, Kinsley and Cannon. We're trying to set them up for the most abundant life, and they'll have the most abundant life if they don't touch the stove, and if they don't run out in the middle of the street, and if they don't do these things. So the best way we like to think about boundaries in marriage with two co-equals is it's kind of like a fence, right? Like, you're putting these safeguards in your marriage to protect it so that the weeds don't get in, so that the animals don't get in, or whatever. And that's really what it's about, is you're setting up a fence and a boundary to guard your marriage. And that's the question, do you guard it? A lot of people, I think, don't even put things in place to guard it. And so that's important. That's what we're talking about today. And we want to toss real quick to a video by Lisa Turkhurst on how your thoughts can destroy any relationship or your relationship specifically. So take a look.
I really wish that I was not an expert at ruining relationships, but I think sometimes I really get in trouble with assigning thoughts to other people that they never think. In other words, I think the quickest way to ruin a relationship is when you put something, a dialogue on somebody that they've never had with you, a thought that they didn't think, and a perception that they're not even having. Let me break it down this way. There's a lady at the gym who I was absolutely convinced hated me because I got on the elliptical one day, and let me just say, she had that body that there wasn't even an ounce of fat on her, not even her belly button, okay? She was just like that girl at the gym. Like, she had it perfect, going on, awesome. The only thing tied on me was my ponytail, okay? So I get on the elliptical beside her, and I kind of got this feeling like, for every other marshmallow feeling woman out there, that I had to keep up with skinny girl beside me. So I get on the elliptical, and I am trying my hardest to stay in tune, in sync, exactly with her. And kind of had this thought, like, I think I can take her. Like, I think I can beat her. And then a friend called me, and I know it's against the rules to answer your phone when you're on the treadmill or on the elliptical, but this friend was having a really hard time, so I thought, I'll just talk really softly and I won't bother her a bit, and I'll talk really quickly. So I answered my phone, but I'd been working so hard to keep up with the skinny girl beside me that I felt like a lung was gonna pop out of my mouth at any moment. And I just couldn't talk quietly, and the conversation wasn't as quick as I'd hoped it would be. And by the time I hung up, the girl beside me was super frustrated. She got off the elliptical, she huffed across the gym, she got on the treadmill, and I was convinced she hated me. So every day I walked into the gym and I would see her and I would assign her all these thoughts of hate that she surely had toward me. And then one day she stunned me. She came out of the bathroom as I was walking in the bathroom in the gym, and she smiled at me. And it wasn't like a smile like, hey, I'm about to whip your tail on the gym floor. It wasn't that kind of smile. It was like super friendly. So then I went to the bathroom and I came out and I got on the elliptical, and going much slower this time because I definitely wasn't trying to keep up with her. And I started thinking, I don't think she ever hated me. I think this whole deal was a perceived rejection on my part. I think I assigned her thoughts, assigned her perceptions that she never, ever even had. That's the quickest way to ruin a relationship. And I don't just do it at the gym with the lady on the elliptical beside me. I do it with my marriage. I do it with my kids. I make assumptions. I develop scenarios. I have whole conversations in my head about wrong thoughts and bad feelings that they're certainly having, and I assign all of that to them, and it ratchets my emotions up so that if I'm doing it to my husband, by the time he gets home, I'll be short and snappy and crazy acting, and I'll say, I just know you've thought all day about how you wish you had a wife that wasn't so emotional. And he'll say, I never had that conversation with you, Lisa. Lisa, you've just assigned me thoughts that I wasn't even thinking. And so we back up and we unpack it, and I settle down and I realize perceived rejection. I think it's having an effect on more of us than we'd even like. And I believe it is one of the quickest ways to ruin a relationship.
So I love that video. Lisa Turkers really hits it on the head about how the mind is really where it starts about guarding your relationship.
Yeah.
And especially, I don't know, maybe you can speak into the guys on this one, but especially for the girls, I feel like it is all the mind. And the mind is totally a battlefield.
Yeah.
And I think where the foxes can get in is when maybe you are discontent and struggling, and so you see somebody else's husband, and you're like, oh, wow, I love how he plays with the kids, or look at how he serves his wife. I wish my husband was like that. And I think the scary thing about it is that the mind is, you're isolated, and it's only you and the Lord that knows your thoughts. Nobody else knows it, so it can go on for a really long time until you develop this heart that is hard against your husband.
Yes, yeah.
And he may not have a clue, and he may not know why all of a sudden his wife
Because
is
you're
like
thinking it,
so
not saying it.
harsh towards him. It's because it's all in the mind. And so really having integrity, having purity, and really taking your mind to the Lord and asking him, okay, God, how can I make my mind as loving and having a thankful heart towards my husband as I can, instead of having these bitter thoughts or comparison, all of these things that we, especially as women, struggle with in the mind.
One of the things you even mentioned too, of like thinking about other people's husbands or other people's wives, that's a thought thing. I think the quote I've heard is, comparison is the thief to true joy.
It is.
Meaning, like, you're not going to have true joy.
And women especially struggle with it.
Exactly. You're not going to have true joy if you're comparing your marriage to other marriages, if you're comparing your spouse to other spouses, because God didn't give you the
That
other
spouse.
person's spouse.
Yeah.
God gave you that person. And I think that's something we've had to walk through, even of like, we have particular personalities, we have a particular marriage, and we have a particular life that doesn't match our friends.
That's so true, even as a couple. You're right.
And another thing I'll just mention too is, I can't think of one failed marriage, divorce, whether it was a divorce or pornography came into the marriage or this or that, where it didn't start with thoughts.
Yeah, it always, any sin starts with a thought. It becomes a thought, which becomes an action, which then becomes the sin and then the death.
Exactly, and I think that's in James where it even talks about that, with it's almost like this pregnancy where you're giving birth and then the baby, and then it breeds death and continually on and on. And so I think that's one thing we want to challenge you guys with is, do you compare? That's one huge practical way to take away with that. And then also, do you take your thoughts captive? The Lord in the scriptures actually
every thought.
Exactly, that we were commanded to actually take our thoughts captive, meaning like you're in charge of your mind. And when you actually realize that and take advantage of that, it breeds a lot of health and a lot of joy in your relationship, because you'll have a thought and you'll say, oh, I need to cut
Right.
that out, remind myself of truth, and all these
And I
different
think
things.
that's the main thing, because we're human, so we are going to have these thoughts.
Yes.
And the sin isn't the thought itself,
Yes.
but it's what you do with the thought. So are you
Yes.
going to dwell on it? Are you going to keep going? Or are you going to say, oh, that's not true, and
Exactly.
then think about something else?
And make it really practical. One of the things that even Alyssa we just talked about a couple days ago is write down the lies you believe,
Yeah.
and then write down the truth that answers that lie. And then when that happens is when that pops up, you kind of think of this mathematical equation you wrote down, and it kind of it pops back in your head with the truth, and that reminds you that
well,
God
it's
is
how
good.
to put off and how to put on.
Exactly. So put off the lies, put on the truth. The battleground's the mind. That's how you create healthy relationships.
Hey guys, I'm Alyssa. This is my husband Jeff, and one of our absolute favorite things is connecting with you guys on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Come check it out so we can connect with you.
So look us up, Jeff and Alyssa Bethke, Bethke. Come say hi.
Join over 60 million people who have connected with Jeff and Alyssa on social media. You can find them on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as their website.
We're so excited to tell you about these 2 guidebooks and then also our main book, Love That Lasts. Now, what this is these are books that we wrote. They came from our story. 2 of them are guidebooks, so they have exercises and kind of fill in the blanks
A
and
him
things
and
of
a
that,
her.
yeah, things of that nature. And then a main book that's our story. That's our journey of dating, breaking up, getting engaged, getting married, having kids. And what these 3 books in total are trying to do is answer the question of what's God's vision for marriage, for sexuality, for the journey we're on in dating and engagement and romance.
And then the workbooks are just things we've learned on the 12 main topics in marriage. You know, communication, conflict, and the mentors that have poured into us and given us so much wisdom on those topics.
Receive your copy of Love That Lasts as TBN's thank you for any gift of support today. And with a gift of $70 or more, we'll also include the His and Hers interactive workbooks. Call or click now to share a gift and request yours, and start building a love that lasts.
Okay, so we are all about boundaries in a relationship. Not that it has to be legalistic, but setting yourself up to
Yes.
flourish and setting
Make practical rules, abide by them.
yes, to flourish in the relationship. So we have a video about that, something that you should never do.
I'm gonna keep that in.
You bet not.
Hey guys, Jeff and Alyssa here. One thing we wanted to talk about this week is actually something we don't get asked often, and that's because it's most commonly overlooked as something very powerful in a relationship, and that's whether you either speak life into your spouse or into your boyfriend or girlfriend, or you kind of speak death, or you don't speak well of them, of your boyfriend or girlfriend or your spouse. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on that, and I love what you have to say on that. So what would you start with?
Yeah, I think it's very common, maybe more with women, about, you know, you get talking and you're talking about your boyfriend or your husband.
With your girlfriends.
And with your
yeah.
girlfriends, and it's really easy to talk really poorly of them, whether you're gossiping or slandering or complaining about him in front of your girlfriends.
Yeah, sometimes it's not even very direct. It's just kind of like little comments
No,
about something maybe you
that
don't like
just
about
tear-
them or bother you.
Yeah, that just tear down at them or don't like give a good light to them. And I think we as women especially just really need to be careful of that and making sure that you're honoring your husband or your boyfriend with your words. Speaking well of them, giving life to a situation, and not that you can, I think there's a line, it's not that you can't be honest, because things are going to be hard, and obviously they're going to do things that you don't like that they do.
Yeah.
But not just really checking your heart and not complaining about it or bringing that up in that setting. If there is something that's really bothering you about them, then to have an older couple that you both agree on, that you both really love, is in marriage. Dating, it's a little different.
Yeah.
But that you both really agree that are for you, for your marriage, that you can go to and talk to and be like, hey, help me understand the situation. How do I, you know, work through this situation? But it's not a time to go and talk about your girlfriends with it and then like everyone like bashing their husbands together. I think that's really dangerous. And then you go home and you suddenly don't like your husband even more because you've been bashing him.
Yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes about that of guys maybe with the beers and bros hanging out at the fire and just like, oh, my wife nags me, or she does this, she does that. And the cool part about the community we're a part of is like, I know me and my friends, like we don't stand for that. And so it's very much actually a culture where we all uplift our wives and build up our wives and just talk about how awesome they are. And it does something really special. And I know she does that with her girlfriends as well. And yeah, be humble and apologize. I know we've been in instances, I even just thought of a friend who did this a little bit back where I don't think he spoke ill of his wife, but he just said maybe, it was one of those things that was so small that we didn't even notice. And all of a sudden, I got a text 30 minutes after we left hanging out with them, and it was, hey man, I didn't love how I said this, or I didn't love how that maybe made my wife feel in that moment. And so he's like, will you forgive me? And I was just like so blown away of like that humility and that kind of accountability he was creating in our community for all of us to then rise up to that standard. And so, it's simple, but it's something that if you implement in your relationship, dating or married, just speak life. Just watch your words, lift them up, bless them, compliment them, and encourage them. And if you do that over and over and over again, it starts really building them up. And when two people are doing that, it really creates this kind of like climbing culture of the couple that betters both of you together. So that's all I'd say. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
Awesome. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Peace. And that's a perfect example of one good, helpful, healthy relationship boundary. And I know that's something, I don't feel like we've actually really struggled with that one as much, but we've seen that.
So many friends.
But friends struggle with that, and I think we've seen the good side of that of, man, when we don't talk about each other bad in public, it goes well for us, and it really creates.
It honors the other person.
And it creates so much unity. I feel like we've never had an argument or a fight or something sneak into our marriage simply because we talked bad about the other person. And I think that's something that is worth fighting for and worth doing. And yeah, like we talked about in the video, we've seen other sides of the coin where some marriages and relationships do that, and it's kind of like this nagging weight. I almost see it as every time a spouse talks bad about the other spouse, especially when they're not there or when they are in the same room, it kind of is almost like attaching a little 5-pound weight to that marriage. And you just keep doing that.
And the whole room, really.
Yeah, in the whole room. And if you keep doing that and keep doing that, it just weighs down the marriage. And if you start adding enough weight, they can't carry it anymore. They can't carry it. And, it's clear from Scripture that words are powerful. And so that one, I think, is one that we try to make very specific and say, okay, if words are powerful, if words create life or death, as James says, then we want to make a rule, make a boundary that our words in our marriage are only going to create life. And it just saves division.
And not that it's lying, it's just
totally
uplifting them and honoring them in public.
Yeah, I think it's about honoring. That's a good way to put it. And so it's all about honoring and all about uplifting your spouse. And what it does too is it's something weird. Like, let me give one quick example that I thought of how sensitive I think it is helpful to be to this. We have a couple friend of ours, Nate and Jenna. They're amazing. And they're one of those couples that we love, they love the Lord, and they work hard at these things as well. And I just remember one particular instance where we had just left hanging out with them, and 15 minutes after we left, I got a text from the husband, Nate, and he basically said, hey man, I'm sorry, I made a small comment about Jenna in the room, and I just didn't feel...
Which we didn't even notice because it wasn't even that big of a deal.
Exactly, and he just said, I didn't feel right about it. I felt like it was maybe hurtful to her or not honoring and kind of demeaning to her. And I just remember reading that text and going, oh man, I was just blown away because like you said,
his humility.
It was so small we didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
And for him to be so sensitive to their marriage and say, and to realize, man, I didn't uplift her. I want every word to uplift her. And they committed to that. And when they fall short of that, they apologize and have grace for each other. But
so good.
What are some maybe relationship boundaries you would say, some other ones that are helpful and things we do?
So when we talk about boundaries, I think it's being pure in our mind and setting up big boundaries like not flirting with another sex, not going in the car maybe with another sex when you're alone with them, but also having good boundaries. So for instance, Jeff, although he may seem like a super extrovert to people, he's actually a real introvert. And so when we...
Outgoing introvert. Is what,
yeah. So let's say we have dinner plans with somebody that night. I know that he's going to need most of the day to prep for that.
Totally.
And so if I get a text being like, hey, let's hang out for the day, let's go do all this and this, I know that he won't have enough energy for that. And so even though I'd love to do that, I have to say, you know what? Today doesn't work. Can we do it on another time?
And I totally love that and agree with that because I am that to a T, right? I am an introvert, and to be able to respect that and honor that boundary creates life in our relationship. And so that's just something I want to challenge you guys out there if you're watching. That respect each other's boundaries. Because here's the thing, what I'm trying to say is you have to have a collective boundary and you have to have collective boundaries, but then you also have to have individual boundaries. And it's about serving the other person and loving the other person. So again, like the example we just gave is Alyssa knows I love being with people, but to recharge my tank, I need to be alone and be reading. Like my ideal vacation and my ideal day is to be alone by myself reading a book for 90 million hours. That's pretty much the best day I could ever think of.
Pretty much your honeymoon.
Exactly. but I need that to then have good relationships after that. And she knows that, and I have things that I know about her that I honor and respect. So one really easy way to do that is ask your spouse, hey, what fills you up? What drains you? How can I respect that? How can I honor that? And when you understand your collective boundaries, it's really good, but it's also really good to understand each person's individual boundaries. We are so excited for our new book, Love That Lasts, because it's a book with our story, about our story, primarily on why God's heart and vision for sexuality, marriage, and love is better than ours. These are books that we wrote. They came from our story. 2 of them are guidebooks, so they have exercises and kind of fill in the blanks and
him
things
and
of
a
that,
her.
yeah, things of that nature. And then a main book that's our story. That's our journey of dating, breaking up, getting engaged, getting married, having kids.
And then the workbooks are just things we've learned on the 12 main topics in marriage. You know, communication, conflict, and the mentors that have poured into us and given us so much wisdom on those topics.
If you appreciate programs like this, we hope you'll help TBN keep them coming to you by sharing a gift of support. As you do, we'll say thank you by sending you their eye-opening new book, Love That Lasts. And with a gift of $70 or more, we'll also include the His and Hers interactive workbooks. Call or click now to share a gift and request yours, and start building a love that lasts.
One of my favorite things to talk about each time is the tip of the week. And guys, specifically, I have one for you that I'm a little passionate about because I think I saw a lot of my friends walk through this, struggle through this, specifically in the college years. I think if you get married a little younger, fellas out there, so if you got married in your late, 18, 19, that's really early, or most of my friends got married young 20s, mid 20s, what happens is we have a tendency to leave and cleave from our mom and dad. But I think in the American world today, with colleges and with friends, we have a tendency to not leave our friends or our bros. We have these bromances, as we like to say, where I think we don't fully retreat and leave from them and then cleave to the new marriage. And so you probably know if that's you. Usually you probably, because the wife is usually the person that'll bring that up because they're more sensitive to that of, hey, you spend a little bit more time with that friend of you than you even do, your friend of yours, than you even do with me. You kind of share more with him than you do with me. He knows maybe some more secrets than I do. If those are things your wife says, you need to listen to those. I think a lot of times we defend ourselves rather than saying, hey, this is actually my wife asking for intimacy. She's asking for closeness. She's asking for us to grow closer and closer together. So instead of defending yourself, just listen. And first of all, that's Jesus, right? He didn't defend himself. Philippians 2, he gave himself up for the sake of the relationship with us. So give yourself up for that. And a lot of times you have to give up things for the sake of your relationship, whether that is your parents, your friends, your city you used to live in. I think you need to understand that when you get married, this is what it's about, and all your energy, all your focus needs to go here. And I think a lot of times we just have unhealthy guy friendships. Have friends, they're amazing. I have buddies. And of course, there's a level of things you can talk about with your guy friends that you maybe can talk about with your wife, but it's a little different or she won't understand, or things of that nature. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. Here's the better way to put it. Who's the center or the source of your relational intimacy? Is it a friend? That's probably wrong if you're married. Meaning if that's the place where you get all your joy, all your satisfaction, all your life, and that's kind of who you want to go hang out with the most and play video games or go to the bar or the casino or all these different things, because sometimes we do a lot of things that are maybe unhealthy for the marriage with those friends. You need to check that. You need to pull back on that. And so that's my tip for you this week is ask yourself, is there any unhealthy relationships or relationships that are taking a piece of the pie more than they should? Your wife is the center. That's who you were called to, and God did not put you in union with your friend. He put you in union with your wife. And so be mindful of that and do that. But what would you say your tip of the week is this week?
Just to bounce off that a little bit, I think that's so good. And I think men maybe go with that a little more because they bond doing things.
That's a good way to put it,
And so I think for the women, I encourage you to jump into your man's world.
Yes.
If he likes going to the movies, go see a movie with him, those type of things, just to go off of that.
Enter the guy's world.
Yeah, so you become best friends. I think a lot of times women, we have pressure to go, and do, and we can become really busy, especially if we're moms because we're always doing something. You have, a half hour that's free, and so you're like, okay, I'm going to grab all the kids and we're going to go. So my encouragement is to have boundaries not only for your marriage, but also for your family. And what is best for your family? What can your kids take on, what can they not, what's healthy.
Yeah.
And I think as the mom, you have the pulse on your family. And so be sensitive to what God is putting on your heart. Be sensitive to the Holy Spirit working in you. We can be really busy and really pour ourselves into the kids and not really take care of ourselves or have boundaries to take care of us, so we have a lot to give to our husbands when they get home that night, and have enough energy so when he comes home, I'm ready to talk, I'm ready to listen. Pouring so much into your kids where you lose track of your husband, you don't even know his heart anymore. And so just as much as you pour into kids, pour even more so into your husband.
Yeah, and just real quick before we close and wrap, I loved that point about just saying no, even if you have nothing else to do.
Yeah,
just be
or even
okay.
if you just don't feel like it. There's
Exactly.
no pressure.
Yes, and here's one quick practical tip to end on that I want to give you guys, and we've done this. Put it on the calendar. It's weird, but if you put it on the calendar, you all of a sudden don't feel guilty about saying no. And then all of a sudden when someone asks you, you say, and you can also get away with it, you can say, oh, I got something on the calendar, because you do.
Setting up boundaries to flourish in your marriage, in your family.
Exactly. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Coming up next week, we are talking about rhythms, and honestly, it's one of the most overlooked things, I think, in any relationship.
I don't think anyone talks about rhythms.
Exactly, and I can say from firsthand experience, us implementing healthy rhythms has been one of the most life-changing things in our relationship. And what we mean by that is there's a cadence and there's a rhythm to the universe, to humanity, to marriage, and when you submit to that, it goes well for you and blessing. And on the opposite, if you've ever seen someone dance out of rhythm, or like your dad clap out of rhythm or clap off beat, it doesn't go well. And a lot of times, that's what our marriages look like when we don't hop into the rhythm God has set for us.
That's so good. We'll be having special guests, Chip and Joanna Gaines, talk about rhythms within their family. And I think we love Chip and Joe so much because here they have this crazy successful TV show and furniture line and real estate, and yet their family is a part of it. And so we are so excited to have them talk to us about rhythms within their family. So tune in next week.
We are so excited for our new book, Love That Lasts, because it's a book with our story, about our story, primarily on why God's heart and vision for sexuality, marriage, and love is better than ours.
And yeah, so we go through our childhood, our dating, our engagement, telling our story and what God did through us. And I think coming from two totally different backgrounds, maybe more of a prodigal side and more of the purity culture. So we're super excited about it.
Call or click now to share a gift or request yours and start building a love that lasts.
Favorite things is connecting with you on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We love hearing from you.
So we can't wait to do life with you guys. Come say hi.